morning everyone and welcome to the webinar. My name is Johan Nell, I'm CTO of Open Spatial. We'll be looking today at using the A-SPEC standards with the ACDC Toolkit. So we'll be looking specifically around R-Spec, S-Spec and W-Spec, some focus around that and some issues to address, and that we'll be going through. So we're looking at the standards, some of the free tools available. How do you deal with multiple configuration? We'll be looking a bit at data creation, setup and configuration, and then how some of the rules and checks that's involved within the process. So ACDC or As Constructed Design Certification support multiple data standards. So we're not tied to a specific standard. So we can work with ADAC, with A-SPEC, with FNQ Rock. And in the US, we work with a variety of different standards there as well. So one of the beautiful things about standards is there's so many to choose from. And basically, you can configure anything within those standards. It's also possible to customize and do your own standard. So for example, Bow and Water use exactly the same mechanism, use exactly the same technology that we use with the A-SPEC standard, but just on their own structure and their own standard. So one site doesn't necessarily fit all, so you can do your own standard as well then. So one of the things with A-SPEC, the new version that's coming out, so some of the shapefile names will change for the classes to be unique. So there's been a few changes around that. Some of the layer names will change because of that. There will be a few new blocks, but the block names in general will stay the same. There's a few new attributes and lookup tables, so a few that were removed and a few additional ones that we will have. There's an updated menu that you can then work with, and we will make those available as soon as the organization take on the new standard. So if you look at then typically here's some customers around the Victoria area. If we look at City of Greater, Dandenong, Bendigo, Wangaratta, Coliban, Watermelton City Council. And so you've got multiple organizations that then submit to multiple councils. And there may be some subtle changes within the standards. And so one of the things that we'll be looking at is how do we deal with that? How can I change the information or the menus, etc., that I can deliver to these different organizations? And we try and make that as easy as possible. Now, within the A-SPEC updates, different organizations have different timelines. So if we look at the overall process that they have, so they get the ASCON submissions coming in, that goes into a staging environment, and then there's a process. It has to go into the GIS and asset management. So part of what they would then need to do is look at the information that gets deleted, how they're going to handle that, new attributes or new classes. How are they going to handle that within the organization? Within a typical council, then you deal with multiple different parts of the organization. So there's the GIS team, there's the assets team, there's the engineers that typically deal with the development community or with the surveyors, etc. And then there's also IT that you have to do, and all of these things have to align, and it has to then fit into all the other projects that's within an organization. So it's not just, okay, here's a new standard, let's take this on, and next week we're up and running, and everybody can access that information. So there is quite a few things then that has to happen for the new standard to be implemented. So if we look in the portal, we make documentation available for you within the portal, where you can then go and download information for that. So if you go and look at the portal and you look at the documents component, that will then tell you, for example, for different organizations, what is their drawing template that they have. So there's a variety of different things. There's asset information requires manuals, etc. So they will make these tools available to you that you can work with. So if there's an update, they will make it available, and when they go and upload the document to the portal, you will get notified about that. So that's part of the notification process of the portal to make this information available to you. So with this new information, there will now be new validation sets. One of the things that you are working with then is a project. So within the portal, you go and define a project. So let's say there's a new subdivision, a project gets defined for that subdivision. Now, if you halfway in a process of delivering a subdivision and the standard change, what is the impact then on the developer? So that's part of where an organization then can make a decision to say, do they want to keep the old standard for existing projects and only go to the new project? So that is part of the communication process where an organization will communicate with you to enable that process for you. And that's a very important part because it has a real world impact then on the development community. So within the A-SPEC standard, we've got a configuration for all the standards that's out there. So water, sewer, drainage, roads, public open space, and building. So the configuration is available for all of that. And what we make available is the following. So there's some CAD templates, both for AutoCAD and for BricsCAD. So we're Autodesk developers as well as BricsCAD developers. So we've got that available. We then make CAD menus available so that when you go and capture the data, you can actually go and it will populate that information for you. We also make a set of empty shapefiles available, so to conform to the standard and the configuration that we have. And then within Attributor, both on the Autodesk App Store and the Brixis App Store, you can actually go and download the Attributor plugin, and you can then also the configuration for A-SPEC. So there's a domain values and a block definition text files or ATR files that we make available to the organization, so the asset owner, and they will also then make it available for you. So if you look at, for example, Bendigo Council, it requires not all of the asset classes to be there, etc., that they are going to work with. And then within the portal, we make a validation set available, so which portion of A-SPEC template. So the new version of A-SPEC is version 5, and that will then be available shortly. We're working on that at the moment to have the updated one available, but there will be a few things within the organizations, as I've explained before, where they will then make that available to you to enable that for you. Now, you may have different menus for different customers. So, for example, if we look at there's the standard one. So, if you look at City of Casey, City of Melton, etc., as using Dandenong, etc., using 100% stock standard A-SPEC, so you don't need to have any worries about any differentiation in there. Barwon is a totally different structure, but it works exactly the same. They give you the set of menus, a drawing template, etc., and it's exactly the same process to capture the data for different organizations. Now, part of what we've done with A-SPEC is to basically codify the entire standard between the menus and the attributor configuration that you can work with. So, for example, if we look at the standard one, building, drainage, public open space, roads, sewer, water, the common block into portal. If we look at Coliban, only does water and sewer. If you look at Wangaratta, but got building, drainage, open space and roads. And then Barwon have got potable water, recycled water and sewer that they then are working with. And so the whole idea is that it enables the organization to get the right ASCOM data to feed their GIS and asset management systems. So within the templates now, typically what we do is we make a standard template available. So if I'm in my AutoCAD and I say File, New, it will then take you to the template directory where you've got all of this information. So there's the A-SPEC drawing template that you have. And then within this template, if I go and look at my drawing properties, you've got all the layers in here for all the various standards. Now within this drawing templates, we typically have got all the asset classes or all the standards in a grouping of color. You do not have to worry about that color. Working with it and getting everything in the same color is a bit confusing. So you can totally customize the colors, the line styles, etc. for it to make sense. So for example, here's R-Spec one that I have customized into different colors that it would make sense, that you can easily work with that information. So the things that you should not change is the layer names, the block names, and the block attribute names. The block geometry, you're also welcome to change that if that makes more sense for your own corporate standard. If you want to use that, you're welcome to change the block geometry information as well. If you also want to use in terms of map reduction, stylization, etc., you can totally go and change that. So layer colors, line styles, your block configuration geometry, your block attributes. So if you want to order the block attributes, move them up and down to more closely align to your data capture process and not have to worry about the attributes that you are working with, you can also go and configure that. So if I go to the block attribute manager and I go in there, and if I look at my pathways, I'm not worried about unit cost and unit references, so I want to move that down, but the various subtypes or my status or my street, what's the information that I want at the top, you can easily have that at the top, and the things that you're not going to work a lot with, you can go and move that down and just update your drawing template. So to speed up your process and your configuration, you are quite welcome to do that. So yes, then in the block attribute manager, you can also work with visibility, the default value, and the prompt. Now what we do is we've taken the description from the A-SPEC standard and we are using that as the prompt. You can also go and change that within the drawing. So the default value, if you, for example, capturing pipes and you're working with 90% of the stuff is 100 mil PVC, you can go and put those in as default value and place that. When you then go and place those blocks, that's pre-filled for you, and you can then only change the one where it is different. Visibility, the same type of thing then when you're looking at an engineering drawing. So if I look at here at the water, then to say, for example, I want to display the diameter material, the same thing if I go and select this, you can see yes, all the pipe type and water type, so all of those things are available, but you can then go and decide which ones of these do you want to go and modify. Or do you want to display that you can easily work with that. So if I go and change the diameter there to, let's say, 200 millimeter, that's automatically updated in the map. You can also go and define, do you want to drag these things around? You can rotate them, etc. So if you still want to produce a proper looking ASCON map that you need to produce, you can easily use these blocks to customize them to give you the result that you need. So typically what I work with is then the directory of templates. So it will go into your app data, local, Autodesk, whichever version of AutoCAD you're using. It can be standard AutoCAD, it can be Map3D, ENU template, and then you can go and put in your subdirectory of templates in there, and you can then easily to say, I'm working with Coliban water or I'm working with Barwon water, etc. You can easily then just go and pick the right template for you. If there's an upgrade, you can just pick up that directory and put that into the new templates directory for your product, and that will then just keep on working without any issues for you. So here, for example, I've got that, so South Australia water, we've got R-Spec, I've got a Barwon water template, one for Wangaratta, that's a standard one. The C one is that we're working with One and Water, so that is part of their process. How do we handle abandoned assets? So what we've done in there is add existing layers to work with existing assets and abandoned assets. So they can supply, yes, existing data, and you can then just move the existing data to the abandoned layer, and they pick that up in the background to then handle that. So that's to enable the process. How do I notify a council that we've now abandoned this asset? That's not immediately obvious in A-SPEC, and so that gives you a process how to handle and manipulate that. Data creation directly in A-SPEC. So what we do is we actually give you all the layers in the CAD template as well as all the attributed blocks. There's the attributed menu in CAD, and you can then go and populate that information automatically for you, that we are working with that. So if I then look, here's all the various layers. So if I then go in, here I'm in water. If I want to say I want to go and draw a pressure main, which is a different color. So in this case, they've actually not changed the layer color, they've changed the actual geometry, so you can easily do that. Okay, so that's by layer. So that was my geometry that was different there, that you can easily do that. And then when you go and place the block, it will automatically set the right snap mode for you, and you can then go and fill in all of the data for you to make it quite easy to do. Now, typically you're going to get this information from survey, and you can easily then just go and place those blocks, etc., to speed up the process. Also, the scale of these blocks, if they are too big, you are quite welcome to make them smaller, especially if you've got a few things on top of each other. So I'm going to give you an example here. So for example, here's then some point data as well. This is just a point display mechanism. I'll go and regen some of those would then be smaller. So you can easily go and make these blocks smaller to work with the data or to work with your environment. So within the standard, what we've done then is you've got all the drop downs happening. So this is whatever is in the A-SPEC standard, you can then go and work with that. So for example, the material, etc., you can then easily work with that. Now, this is basically a pick list that you can work with. We'll also give you the ability to zoom to the entity, and you can decide whether you want to see the code and description. Now, RC2 is the code that's going to be transferred into the standard. The code and description is then the information that you are working with. We've had a very good example recently where we're working with existing A-SPEC member that have been accepting data, and we took one of their ones that was accepted and picked up that, for example, that was on D-Spec, the pipe material, concrete didn't exist in the lookup table. You needed to subdivide the concrete into one of the other categories. So part of the process is actually doing the validation is an important part of the process. So basically, you've got all the A-SPEC layers in the CAD template. You've got the attributor menu, you've got the drop downs, and then the empty shapefile. So you can actually go and create the data in something like QGIS as well. So the portal will accept shapefiles. It will accept AutoCAD or BricsCAD DWGs, and it will accept MIP files. So there may be organizations that want you to submit MIP files that's not subscribed to the portal. You can actually work in AutoCAD, submit it to the portal. It can create MIP files or shape files for you. So you could actually have one process that you are working with. Council subscribe to the portal or not subscribe to the portal, and you can actually submit validated drawings to them that you've got a level of comfort that you know it's actually gone through the process, it meets the requirements, and you can submit it with confidence to the portal. Some of the portal extended functionality, so you can submit CAD drawing shapefiles, MIP files. You can also submit project documents, so inspection plans, CCTV footage, traffic management plan. So you can submit up to 2 gigabyte per file. So if you've got a big CCTV, that it can work within that process. And within the portal, you can go and define what is the type of project that you have. So if you submitting water versus sewer, you may have different types of documentation that's required. We enable the organization to go and define these document sets to say, for a 2-lot subdivision for water, this is the documents that we require, versus for large subdivision on sewer, it's going to be a totally different set of documentation, and that can be then totally defined as well. We also do notification emails. So typically the process is you submit something to the portal. We don't care if you submit 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 times. One of the decisions that we made early on is not to punish you for submitting drawings, but enable the person doing the capture to make the process as easy as possible. So if you submit it, you don't have to go and do 2 hours worth of QA before you submit it to the portal. The portal will guide you. So if you then go and capture the data, submit it to the portal, it will tell you where you've got the errors, and you can then go and fix those errors until it passes the validation. Once it's passed the validation, you can then go and send a notification to your asset owner, so the council or the utility, to say, okay, I am happy with this drawing, this submission I'm going to make, and you then go and mark it as ready for review. That then sends a notification to the organization. They will then go and download that. They will look at that through their internal process. And if it passed validation, firstly, that's certified. So that's basically saying we've tested it against the standard that this organization has set, and that drawing is now certified, and you've notified them that it's ready for review. Now, they can still reject it based on some engineering principles to say, no, this is not correct, and they can then ask you to resubmit against that project, or they can accept it, and either the reject and the accept, they will be notified. Now, as an organization, this notification mechanism, you can go and define that within the system, then who gets notified when what happens. So, for example, if something is ready for review, who within your organization get notified? Is it the engineering team? Is it the engineering and GIS team? So that depends on the internal process then between engineering, assets, GIS, etc., who does what at what stage. That whole notification process can be customized per organization to tell you exactly what is happening. Now, there's the portal solution. So that's basically the process. You submit it to the portal, it gets validated, you correct it, mid-MIF shape or drawing. It then gets within the organization, so they can then pick up either, let's say, a shape file or the drawing file and convert that to the GIS and asset management system. Now, there might be slightly different workflows. Some people go directly to GIS and then populate asset management system. Now, part of the process then is that we're loading the data into the asset management can also be a complex process. Now, we're busy with that process with Bulbul Shire Council. So, see, Catherine is with us today to automatically generate those asset load files for you, that it will actually go and populate your asset management from the information from the portal. Internally, you can do the drawing file validation and then conversion, and then go and populate your spatial database, the corporate GIS, and the asset management system. In terms of the process itself, I started off by saying that we've built a totally configurable system. So within this process, we've got a mechanism how you can go and configure this data. And that is the very imaginative name of the configurator that we've come up, and basically that it can fit your requirements. So basically what you're going to do is what's the layer naming convention that we're going to be working with, what's the block naming convention. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the A-SPEC standard that's got more to do with GIS and asset management. We've taken the CAD standard and combined these two then to codify between the CAD standard and the asset management and GIS standard. How you're going to convert the data into the system. And that's then within the attribute. So where I'm going to go and say, for this attribute, where is that going to go to and where does that fit within the standard? So there's up to 4.7. So there were some classic rules for A-SPEC attributes that we'll be looking at. So typically, is the data type correct? So are you trying to put in a character value in an integer field? Is it mandatory or not? So that's some of the errors that you may receive, is to say if there's an empty mandatory value, whether it will fail that then for you. There's the validation lookup table name, so that's the code lists coming from A-SPEC that you have. Now, one of the things then, organizations may actually customize the code list. So typically then there may be, let's say, for material, there may be 50 different materials within A-SPEC. But for that organization, only 25 of those are valid. They do not allow the use of some of those other materials within their system or for new values. So there may be a subset of the lookup tables or code list from A-SPEC to meet those requirements. So that's just one of those things where there may be a slight subset of the data. One of the other things then is the linear branch. So for example, a property connection must be connected to a gravity pipe or a pressure pipe or a pressure main or in D-spec on a pipe. Now, part of that, if you remember the specification that we'd spoken about with one in water, where they want to handle existing data, one of the things that may happen is on different stages. So for example, you've got a stage happening. So now a pipe was added in stage 1, but in stage 2, there's now new property connections going onto the pipe that was done in stage 1. But for stage 1, you've already submitted that pipe. So what do? Do you either let the property connections float in thin air, or do you put it on the existing, or you put that pipe in again? But then that pipe could be converted twice, so that gives you problems. So what we've done is, where the CAD gives you a lot of flexibility, so you can then just have where we've got the new, you can just have an existing layer, and in the configuration we add that existing layer, so a new property connection can go onto existing pipe as part of the rules, and you can then easily go and define that to work through the process there. The next thing is then snapping values. So snapping values is, there's 3 different states that typically will work. So for example, a pipe, a pit, or a pump must be at the end of a particular network. So typically you're not going to have in sewer gravity a pump on the middle of a pipe. It must be somewhere at the end of the pipe. So that's what we will do. You'll go and put that at the nearest end. If we look, for example, a valve, you can actually then place it in the middle of a pipe. So if you then go and capture a pipe, and we'll use an example when we work like this. So there you can see I've got a pipe, and there I've got a pipe, and there I've got a valve. So what we would do is to say, if all your diameter and material, etc., so there you can say that's 100 HDPE, 100 HDPE, you could actually make all of that one pipe. And at this valve, we will go and break the pipe and then distribute the data across both of these asset classes. So you can easily go and do that to make the data capture process as easy as possible. So we can then go, and especially on water is the one where it would be most relevant, where you can then go and say a valve must be on the pipe, and we will then go and break it at that pipe for you. but you don't need to recapture at each and every segment along the way. With ACDC 5, we have expanded the rules quite a lot. Also, the error messages, we've clarified that a lot more. So if it will tell you, I can't find something, it will tell you the right layer that it is talking about, where it can't find the relevant assets, etc. So there's quite a few new rules that's embedded within the system. So there's two things. Within A-SPEC, we have defined a number of these rules that will go as standard, but you can actually go and expand these rules quite a lot. So for example, with attribute single character check, if you want to say we've got a typical project number, so that it must start with a GB, so the first two characters must be GB and it must be uppercase, so that's a substring check. The last character must be a 23 for the year or something like that. The other one is then a multi-value check. So I know in A-SPEC there's no diameters defined. So what you can do with a multi-value check is then to say, for a specific pipe material, here's my valid diameters. So if it's PVC or UPVC, then here's a list of my valid diameters across the entire system. So anything that I want to compare to anything else can be defined within the configuration. The other thing that's very important that we've added then is the concept of warnings. So a lot of these more complex checks we've added as warnings, and you can totally go and decide whether then any of this is error or a warning. Do you want to fail based on that, or do you want to notify the person on that? Now, the way that the warning work within the portal, it differentiates between an error and a warning, so it can still pass validation with a warning, but it will tell the person submitting as well as the asset owner that, okay, this drawing has passed validation, but there are warnings, and they can then go and look at those warnings and decide whether they want to accept those or not. So spatial checks, if we look at roads, for example, a road center line must be inside the road surface area, or playground equipment must be contained within a park, or a pump must be contained within a pump station. So where you've got a one layer with a polygon and a point layer must be contained within, so you can define any of those type of things that you have. The next one, for example, if we look at connectivity, so sewer, drainage, and water. So how many pipes can be connected to a road? So for example, end cap, you can't have an end cap in the middle of a pipe typically. So if you've got an end cap or you've got a wing wall, there can be, what is the minimum and maximum amounts. So if you've got a valve, typically there's going to be a minimum of one and a maximum of two pipes associated with the valve. You can't have a valve splitting typically then into multiple valves or pipes coming into one valves. And so all of those rules are then totally configurable then as well. One of the other things, spatial and attribute checks. So one of those, the things that we've got then is the road center line, and both in the road surface and the road center line actually contain the road name attribute or the street name attribute. And so you can say this pavement must have a road center line in it, and the street names must correspond. So that's one of the more compound checks that you can do. Another one is that you can do is the diameter of fitting must match the diameter of the pipe that it is looking at, and it will look then at both sides of the pipe. So if I've got a fitting with a certain diameter, it can go and check on both sides of that. So what we're trying to do is build a lot more of the engineering type of checks within the system, so that when people actually go and do validation, it's not only the GIS validation, but also a lot more of the engineering validation that we can work with. On drainage and sewer, one of the things that we then also checking is on the pipe itself, we will check your upstream invert elevation must be higher than the downstream invert elevation. Now, we're adding this by default at the moment as a warning, so there are exceptions to the rules with that, but that's then one of those things that we can do. But that's not all. We also then go and look at, so if you've got a node there, we will go and check here the downstream invert elevation of this pipe must be higher or the same than the upstream elevation of this pipe. So we're actually comparing the information next to each other that you would have in there. What we're also doing that you may notice, we have got the option in the configuration that we actually can go and flag the pipe direction. So we will go and put some direction arrows onto the network. So if you start seeing in your ASCON drawing direction arrows appearing with ACDC 5, that's one of the settings so that you can easily go and check what is going on there. Another one, for example, one of the rules for the Victorian on the roadside, say a driveway polygon may not be within 7 meters of a roundabout polygon, so you can actually go and define that rule within. So it's not only this must be within, it can also be within a different distance that you can working with, that we can go and validate that for you. So when we're working with it on the portal, we will actually tell you then where there's an error. So if you've submitted a shapefile, we will give you an error shapefile that you can open, and that will tell you where the errors are. And we're expanding that a lot to clarify a lot of the information in there. We've also in the portal the help environment, and we're expanding that a lot then as well. So if you go onto the portal and you go to the help, what we have is, if you're a developer, we've given you a guide there. There's a guide to accepting and rejecting submissions, administration, dashboards, etc. So part of this process then is also some common validation errors, how to fix that, and we're expanding that one. So we'll shortly do an update of this to give you more information as well there. So typically what's happening in there is a lot of the errors. So it will say, I've got so many objects, how many analyzed, so many spatial errors, how many attribute errors that you've got within the system. So if we look at S-Spec, pipe direction, invert elevation checks, comparative checks that we are dealing with. Now, one of the next things then that I just also want to show you working on the portal, if you look at validations, okay, so if I go and look at here what is happening, what this will do is part of the process is then saying for a submission that was made, it will then tell you, okay, how many errors and warnings have you had, so you can easily go and expand that. It will then also tell you for any of these asset classes. So for example, I've got area extent, pipes, pits, and property connections. I've got 20 property connection. I've got 18 pits. I've got 60 new pipes. What is the total length? What is the longest and the shortest one? So the smallest area, the largest area for pits, for pipes, the shortest length and the longest length that you've got, to give you information on that. What it will then also tell you which asset classes has nothing been submitted. So that's part of that submission documentation. So there will be an update to that then shortly, that will actually tell you that you can then automatically populate your document with this is the information that was submitted. You can also then double check from your expectation then what was submitted, what was not submitted within the process, that you can have a look at that information, that it will automatically populate that for you. So it's starting to give us a lot more information that we are dealing with. If it passed validation, so here you can see it's certified but with 4 warnings. So it will then tell you where you've got the error. So this is then your R-Spec, your curves, etc. So what is it, a point, a line, or a polygon feature with all of the various information in there. And if it fails validation there, it will give you some feedback on that. If there's then any warnings, so passed, entered, failed, and entities with warnings. So that one has got a lot of different attribute errors. So we're trying to guide you to make your life as easy as possible then within this, to say, here's the errors, what's the problems that I may then have within that. So part of that compound check then on sewer pipe direction, your invert elevation checks and the comparative checks that we would be looking at. Water is the breaking of the entities. So if we go and get here, we've spoken about, for example, a valve will go and break the entities in there, the angles, etc., that you can easily change within the system to work with that there. Now, one of the things that you will see in the latest version is they export objects to CZML. So if you look at the Victorian digital twin, for example, or the New South Wales or Western Australia, you can actually go and take the configuration. If we look at sewer and drainage, where there's invert elevations, we can actually go and regenerate the 3D from the 2D data, export that as CZML, and you can actually then go and take your 3D view, put that into the digital twin environment and visualize that in 3D. So watch out for that technology in the portal then shortly as well. Okay, so we've got the error markers in the code. So now in the new version, what we're doing is we tell you exactly which layers it is in there. You've got the same one in the GIS environment that you can easily go and verify that. So ACDC with A-SPEC is a mature solution. It's been in use for over 10 years. The portal has been live for over 5 years. More than 2,000 projects, over 10,000, so we're on about 14,000 validations now. So we've had the last 5 months with more than 300 submissions to the portal every month, so the use is growing. And the whole idea is that we offer a complete workflow solution so that you could use CAD survey, you can use AutoCAD, you can use BricsCAD or other systems as well, and enabling you to be able to submit that information, and that you can go from the concept to the design to the ASCON, submitting that, doing the validation, doing the workflows with all notification into the GIS, and then also going and submit that to the digital twin. So that is an example of a road subdivision into the digital twin that's then draped onto the environment. John, you've got a question?
With the new lot of A-SPEC settings of version 5 coming or now online, and they're going to be active with some councils from next month onwards, when will we see updated templates for them on ACDC portal, please?
We are working on it, and it will be available very soon. I hope for next week, but it's probably the week after or something like that, without promising a specific date. We just have to double check that everything is working correctly, and there has been update to the standards later this week, some of the things that we've picked up. We'll have it for all of the standards available very quickly. It's fortunately not such a big job, but we just have to take the normal care. All right then. Thank you very much, everyone. There's my contact details. If you need to contact us or have any questions, feel welcome to contact me. Thank you very much.